She was his assistant for 2 years, efficient, invisible, and quietly heartbroken. He was her arrogant, cold-hearted billionaire boss, too afraid to admit he felt anything at all. But when she began wearing an engagement ring from a man who no longer lived, everything shattered. He thought he'd lost her to someone else. She thought he'd never cared. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sound of stilettos clicking against polished marble echoed through the sleek, glass-paneled corridors of Kane Global Enterprises. Nadia Foster walked with the calm, composed elegance of a woman who had long ago learned to keep her head high, no matter how many times she was made to feel small. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, her beige blouse crisp, tucked perfectly into a tailored navy pencil skirt. A stack of carefully arranged files rested in her arms, organized by color-coded tabs and alphabetized sections. She knew her boss preferred it that way, though he'd never once said thank you. Alexander Kane didn't believe in compliments or mercy. She stopped outside his office, inhaled deeply, and knocked twice before stepping in. The door whispered shut behind her, and immediately, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You're 5 minutes late, Miss Foster," came the deep, disapproving voice from behind the massive mahogany desk. Nadia didn't bother checking her watch. She knew she wasn't late. "Apologies, Mr. Kane. There was a security delay in the parking garage. I brought the updated reports you requested." He didn't look up from his computer screen. "They better be more accurate than the disaster you submitted last week," he muttered. Her jaw tightened. There it was again, the habitual scorn. It was as predictable as the rain in London, just part of the climate here. She placed the files gently on his desk and straightened. "I cross-checked all the projections with the new analytics software you approved. You'll find the revised forecasts in the second folder." This time, he did look at her. His eyes, an intense ice blue, flicked briefly from the folders to her face. There was a pause, a flicker of something unreadable behind that stoic expression. But then he scoffed and picked up the top file. "I'll be the judge of that," he said. Nadia fought the familiar sting of humiliation. She'd pored over those reports until 2 a.m., working from her tiny apartment with a cup of stale coffee and aching feet. But none of that mattered here, because Alexander Kane was the type of man who built empires and crushed feelings like ants underfoot. To the world, he was a genius. Ruthless, visionary, and devastatingly attractive. Tabloids called him the Iceman of Wall Street. He made billions, shattered rivals, and never smiled unless it was to tighten the knife in someone's back. To Nadia, he was the storm she braved every weekday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Her boss, her daily challenge, and, though she would never admit it out loud, the source of more confusion and emotional turbulence than she cared to acknowledge. For 2 years, she had worked under him as his personal assistant, managing his schedule, coordinating board meetings, proofreading contracts, even remembering which brands of water he preferred at different times of day. He rarely spoke to her unless he was criticizing. He had never once asked about her life. He'd never even held a door for her. And yet there were moments, like the time she caught him watching her with a strange intensity during a staff meeting, or the way he'd once defended her in front of a client who'd insulted her work, only to turn around and scold her 5 minutes later for a misaligned paperclip. It was emotional whiplash. It was exhausting. It was Alexander Kane. She turned to leave his office, eager to escape before he found another flaw to point out. Nadia. The rare use of her first name made her pause. She turned, surprised, but his eyes were already back on the screen, his face unreadable. "That will be all." Dismissed. Just like that. As she stepped out of his office and let the door click shut behind her, she let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her heels carried her back to her desk like clockwork, but her mind remained behind that closed door. She used to wonder what she had done to earn his contempt. She had cried early on, alone in bathroom stalls and quiet supply closets. But now the tears were gone. In their place was quiet endurance. He hated her. That was the only explanation. And she had accepted it. Until the day came when one small, gleaming ring on her finger shattered everything he thought he could ignore. The sun rose on a Monday morning that began like every other for Nadia Foster. Quietly, with the scent of vanilla tea drifting through her apartment and a muted song playing on her phone while she dressed for work. But today was not like other days. Today marked exactly 1 year since Lucas died. Lucas Hart, her fiancé, her first love, her would-have-been husband. The man with a boyish grin, a crooked tie he never fixed properly, and a habit of sneaking pastries into her purse when she wasn't looking. He was supposed to be beside her still, laughing, loving, arguing over what pizza to order. But fate had other plans. A collision on a rainy highway. A phone call that had shattered her world. The wound had scabbed over, but it had never truly healed. This morning, Nadia stood by her dresser, staring at a small velvet box tucked in the corner like a secret she wasn't ready to bury. Her fingers hesitated for a long moment before she reached for it. Inside was the ring. A slender gold band with a single, round diamond, simple, timeless, and full of unspoken memories. Lucas had given it to her under a maple tree in the park, on a windy afternoon when the sky had been the gray-blue. He had been nervous, stammering, and awkward. She had said yes before he even finished the question. Today, she didn't wear it as a promise to someone else. She wore it for herself, for remembrance, for closure. Just 1 week, she told herself. 1 week of honoring what had been before finally letting go. She slipped it onto her left hand. It felt both foreign and familiar, like an echo of a song she used to know by heart. She took one last look at the box before snapping it shut and tucking it away. And then she went to work. At Kane Global, the lobby bustled with the usual Monday morning chaos. Assistants darted past in pencil skirts and pressed suits, interns clutched coffee trays like lifelines, and executives barked orders into earpieces. Nadia moved through it all with her usual grace, brushing past chaos like wine through a field. But there was one set of eyes that noticed everything, and today they noticed the ring. Alexander Kane had been reviewing a marketing strategy proposal when she stepped into his office that morning. The moment she placed his coffee on the desk, his eyes flicked toward her hand. It was only a second, a glance, a breath in time, but something in him froze. The black ink of his pen stopped mid-sentence. His grip on it tightened. His spine stiffened just slightly, just enough to betray the internal jolt that had rippled through him. Nadia didn't see it. She was too focused on reviewing his flight itinerary aloud, flipping through her notepad as she spoke. When she reached the end, she looked up. "Would you like me to confirm dinner with the Tokyo team for Wednesday or Thursday, sir?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes were still on the ring. "Nadia," he said slowly, as if tasting her name. She blinked. "Yes, Mr. Kane?" A pause. His jaw tightened. His gaze snapped up to her face, guarded now. "Thursday," he said flatly. "And cancel the meeting with Marsh and Parker. I'm done wasting time with people who don't know what they want." Confused by the sudden edge in his tone, she simply nodded. "Yes, sir." She turned to leave, unaware that his eyes followed her all the way to the door. By midweek, the shift in Alexander Kane was impossible to ignore. He had always been cold, yes. But now he was quiet, restless. His usual rhythm was off. He stared out windows too long, snapped at board members, left his lunch untouched. And every time Nadia walked into the room, his eyes were drawn like magnets to the glint of gold on her hand. She noticed it the second time, and the third. By Friday, she could feel it burning on her finger, his gaze, sharp and unspoken, piercing her composure. He was never cruel anymore, but he was distant in a new way. Not the distance of disinterest. No, this was something more volatile, something bubbling under the surface. Jealousy? Hurt? Regret? He didn't speak of it. Not directly. But when she laughed at a junior exec's joke in the hallway, Alexander's voice cut through the air like steel. "If you have that much energy to spare, Miss Foster, perhaps I've been underworking you." She blinked, startled by the abrupt reprimand. "I'm sorry, sir. Get me the full Q3 breakdown by the end of the day," he said coolly. "And double-check operations figures. Your last summary was acceptable at best." Then he turned and walked into his office without another word. That night, Nadia stayed late at the office. The building had grown quiet. Shadows from the city lights stretched across the floor, and the only sound was the hum of her computer. She stared at the spreadsheet in front of her, but saw none of it. Her thoughts were stuck on him. The way his eyes followed her. The tension in his shoulders. The strange emptiness in his voice now when he spoke her name. And underneath it all, beneath the careful professionalism and years of disdain, was something she hadn't dared consider before. Was he jealous? The very thought was absurd. Alexander Kane, emotionless, untouchable Alexander, jealous? But she couldn't shake the memory of his expression when he first saw the ring. That first, unguarded second of something like devastation. A chill ran through her. Had he really hated her all this time? Or had she mistaken something else for hate? Nadia looked down at the ring on her finger, glinting softly under the office light. Her heart ached with old sorrow. But for the first time in a long time, it stirred with a whisper of something new. Something she didn't yet dare name. Alexander Kane stood at the corner of the executive conference room, his jaw tight, arms folded, eyes fixed on a conversation that had nothing to do with him, at least not officially. Nadia was laughing. It wasn't her usual polite laugh. It was something deeper, genuine, a sound that cracked through the air and lodged itself in his chest like a splinter. She was speaking with Ryan Barlow, the new financial analyst with a well-rehearsed charm and an eye for every woman on the 12th floor. And now he had found his way to Nadia's desk, leaning far too close, flashing that annoyingly perfect grin. Alexander couldn't hear what they were saying, but he didn't need to. Her smile said enough. His stomach turned with something primal, sharp, hot, and unwelcome. He should have been reviewing the contracts for the Taiwan merger. Instead, his mind was stuck on her, and his heart beat in a rhythm that had nothing to do with business. The ring. That damned ring. Ever since he'd seen it on her finger, his world had lost its predictable shape. For 2 years, he'd trained himself to keep his distance, to maintain control, to bury the feelings that clawed at his chest every time she entered a room with that quiet competence and calm grace. But now the illusion of distance was crumbling, because someone else had taken what he had never dared to reach for. He clenched his fists, turned from the glass wall, and stormed back into his office, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the frame. Nadia jumped at the sound. The whole office did. "Wow," Ryan chuckled nervously. "Is he always like that?" She forced a tight smile. "You get used to it." But the truth was, no, he wasn't always like that. Not lately. He had become different. Ever since he saw the ring. He barely spoke to her now unless necessary. The scathing remarks had stopped, but so had any warmth. Instead, he had become cold in a new way. Distant, yes, but also unsettled, as if she'd thrown him off balance just by existing. She wasn't sure what to make of it. That afternoon, when she brought in his revised financial brief, he didn't look up. Not at first. "Leave it on the desk," he said flatly. She hesitated. "Would you like me to schedule a follow-up with the legal team, or?" "I'll handle it." Still no eye contact. She turned to leave. But then suddenly his voice cut through the air again, quieter this time, and far more dangerous. "Is it recent?" She stopped in her tracks, her hand still on the doorknob. "Excuse me?" "The engagement," he said without looking at her. "Is it recent?" Her breath caught. He was staring at his laptop screen, but his hands had stilled. Nadia glanced down at the ring, the answer hovering on her tongue, but instinct stopped her. Something about his tone felt intimate, wounded, raw. "Yes," she lied softly. "Kind of." He didn't respond for a long moment. Then voice clipped, "Congratulations." She swallowed. "Thank you." And then he added, almost too quietly, "He must be very lucky." It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't cold. It was regret. The door clicked shut behind her, and Nadia stood in the hallway reeling. By Friday, the office was a minefield. Alexander snapped at 3 senior execs. He canceled 2 meetings without explanation. And when he walked into the break room and found Nadia sipping tea beside Ryan again, he stopped short. Her laughter halted when she saw him. He didn't say a word, just stared for a long, blistering second, and then turned and left without a sound. Ryan blinked. What's his deal? Nadia didn't answer. Her heart was pounding. That night, after everyone had left, Alexander sat alone in his office, sleeves rolled up, tie loose around his neck. The city lights shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but he barely noticed them. He was nursing a drink he hadn't touched, staring at the printed itinerary Nadia had dropped off hours ago. Her handwriting was neat, precise, familiar. He closed his eyes. For 2 years, she had been at his side, loyal, brilliant, endlessly patient. He had kept her at arm's length. No farther. He had buried his attraction in sharp words and cold silence, terrified that letting her in would destroy the armor he'd spent years building. He hadn't known what to do with someone like her. Nadia Foster was not a fling. Not someone you used and discarded. She was the kind of woman you ruined yourself for if you got too close. And now, someone else had seen what he hadn't had the courage to claim. He had no right to be angry. No right to want her. But every time she smiled at that ring, his chest burned. With jealousy. With fear. With the aching, maddening realization that he was losing her. And she had never even been his. It was after midnight when Nadia finally left her desk, gathering her things slowly. She passed his office on the way out and paused. The light was still on. She knocked softly. No answer. She cracked the door open and saw him there, unmoving, eyes closed, the glass in his hand untouched. For a fleeting second, she thought he was asleep. But then he spoke. I keep telling myself I imagined it, he said quietly, eyes still closed. She froze. He opened his eyes and looked at her. Truly looked at her, for the first time in days. But I didn't, did I? He continued, voice like gravel. You're really engaged. Nadia's lips parted, but no words came. He stood slowly, walking toward her with deliberate slowness, like a man approaching something sacred or dangerous. When I saw the ring, he said, I thought it was a joke, or maybe just a piece of jewelry, something meaningless. But then you smiled at it, the way someone smiles when they're remembering something they don't want to forget. His voice cracked slightly. I hated that smile, he confessed, because it didn't belong to me. Nadia's eyes shimmered. He stood just a foot away now. I've spent 2 years pretending I didn't care, he said. That I didn't see you. That I didn't feel anything. But the truth is I was a coward. And I let you slip away without ever trying. Silence bloomed between them. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't expect anything, he added, his voice barely above a whisper. I just needed to say it. Then he stepped back. Good night, Nadia. And before she could answer, he turned away. She stood there, heart thudding, tears burning in her eyes, and realized that nothing between them would ever be the same again. The weekend passed in a haze of silence. Nadia couldn't stop replaying his words. The way Alexander Kane had stood in his office, so controlled yet so painfully vulnerable, saying things she never imagined hearing from him. Not him. Not the man who had built a fortress of cold precision around himself. Not the man who had made her feel invisible for 2 years. But he had seen her. He had felt something. And now, after years of indifference, he had confessed it, unguarded, thinking she belonged to someone else. She had lied to him. Not out of malice, but instinct. Out of self-protection. Because his sudden shift had overwhelmed her. Because it hurt to reopen a part of her heart she'd been trying to bury for a year. But the ring on her finger told a story that wasn't quite true anymore. And Monday morning, as she stood before the mirror fastening the delicate clasp of her necklace, Nadia realized something. She wasn't ready to keep living in the in-between. It was time to let go, not just of Lucas, but of the grief that had kept her from moving forward. She would tell Alexander the truth. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt unusually heavy. She kept her gaze forward, shoulders squared, hands neatly folded. She passed reception, her heels clicking rhythmically against the tile floor, and headed straight to his office. He was already there, leaning against the edge of his desk, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled to the forearm, looking out the window with a haunted expression. The skyline burned gold with the rising sun behind him, and for a brief moment, he looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man adrift in his own thoughts. She knocked gently. He turned sharply, as if startled. Nadia. Her name left his lips like a breath he'd been holding. I need to talk to you, she said. There was a long silence, and then he stepped aside and gestured toward the chair in front of his desk. She sat. He didn't. He leaned forward, hands pressed on the edge of the desk, his gaze locked on hers. Nadia, he said again, slower this time. Before you say anything, I want to apologize. Again. She opened her mouth, but he lifted his hand to stop her gently. I need to say this first. Please. She nodded. He took a deep breath. I was cruel to you. Dismissive. Unkind. I told myself I was being professional, that you were just an employee. But that was a lie. The truth is, I didn't know how to handle what I felt for you. From the very first day you walked into my office, you've been. He stopped, searching for the words. More than I could understand. You were poised, capable, and completely unaffected by my mood swings. That unnerved me. No one unnerves me. And instead of being honest with myself, I pushed you away. I insulted your work. I kept you at a distance because every time you walked into a room, I lost control. He finally looked up, eyes bright and unguarded. I was afraid. The room felt utterly still. I assumed you were taken, he continued. That the ring meant someone had already done what I didn't have the guts to do. And when I realized I'd lost you before I ever had the chance, something inside me broke. He paused again. The vulnerability in his expression was so jarring that Nadia's breath caught in her throat. I know I've hurt you, and I know it's probably too late, but I couldn't let another day go by without telling you the truth. I love you, Nadia. The words hung in the air like the final note of a symphony. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stood. Alexander straightened instinctively, preparing for rejection, or maybe just silence. But instead, she stepped around the desk, closing the space between them. Her voice was soft but steady. I'm not engaged. He blinked. What? She lifted her left hand. The ring was from someone I loved. Lucas. He passed away last year. A long silence. His jaw tensed, but he said nothing. She looked down at the ring, gently twisting it around her finger. Today would have been our 3rd anniversary. I wore it for a week, to remember him. But I didn't realize what it would do to you. He turned away slightly, rubbing the back of his neck. I was so sure. I thought I'd missed my chance. She stepped closer. You didn't, she said softly. But you did scare me. He looked back at her, guilt clouding his eyes. You kept me at arm's length for 2 years. Made me feel like I was barely tolerated. I was terrified, he admitted. I didn't know how to be soft with someone who mattered. I've only ever known how to lead, control, demand. But you, he broke off, his voice thick. You deserved better. I should have told you long ago. She smiled faintly. You should have. A beat of silence. But, you're telling me now. The relief in his expression was quiet, but immense. He exhaled deeply, as if he'd been holding his breath for a year. She looked down at the ring one last time, then gently slid it off her finger and placed it in her palm. I've been thinking of donating it, she said, her voice tinged with the sadness of goodbye. Letting it go, and maybe helping someone start their story. Alexander reached out, cautiously, as if unsure whether he was allowed, and closed her hand around it. You don't have to rush, he murmured. Not for me. I want to, she replied. I think. I'm ready. A long pause followed, full of something unspoken but understood. Then, slowly, she stepped into his arms. It wasn't a passionate kiss or a dramatic embrace. It was gentle. Healing. His arms circled her like they were made for it, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of a heart that had been hidden behind walls for far too long. They stood like that for a while, quiet, present, and finally honest. Two people who had spent years pretending not to see each other, now standing in the truth. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And it started with 3 simple words and the courage to finally speak them. Rain tapped gently against Nadia's window as she sat on the floor of her apartment that Saturday morning, legs folded beneath her and the velvet ring box resting in the center of her open palm. The world outside was gray and quiet, like it knew she needed stillness. She hadn't opened the box in days. After her conversation with Alexander, she had tucked it away in the drawer again, uncertain of what the next step was. Now here it was, right in front of her, small and weighty, carrying 1,000 memories in something no bigger than a matchbox. Nadia breathed in, then opened it. The ring sat nestled in soft black velvet, just as it had the day Lucas proposed. There was a time when this had been her favorite sight, a symbol of their future. His trembling hands, her teary yes, the shaky laugh they shared afterward. They had made so many plans, but life doesn't always honor promises. Nadia picked it up between her fingers. It was still beautiful, still hers, but no longer where her heart lived. She reached for the envelope lying beside her, a printed-out form from a charity foundation that accepted donated jewelry to support grieving families and women rebuilding their lives after loss. It felt fitting, the kind of tribute Lucas would have smiled at. With careful fingers, she placed the ring inside a soft cloth pouch, folded the donation form, and sealed everything in the padded envelope. She didn't cry. Not this time. There was sadness, yes, but there was also a soft peace. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant making space for something new. Later that afternoon, Nadia stood outside the post office in a soft beige coat, the envelope clutched in her hands like a final love letter. It had stopped raining. The sky was clearing, slow and reluctant, as if even the weather understood how heavy this moment was. She stepped inside, joined the short line, and when it was her turn, she handed the package over with both hands. The postal worker stamped the label. "Want a tracking number?" "No," she said softly. "No, thank you." She turned and walked away, the faintest smile on her lips and her hands finally light. That evening, her phone lit up with a message. "Alexander, are you free for dinner tonight?" She stared at the screen for a moment. The last few days had shifted something between them, yet neither had defined it. Still, something unspoken had begun to bloom. A fragile truce turning slowly into something more. "Nadia." "Yes. I'd like that." A few minutes later, another message came through. "Alexander, dress warm. I'm picking you up in an hour. No heels." She arched a brow, intrigued, but did as he said. Exactly an hour later, he was at her door. Gone was the tailored suit and boardroom persona. Tonight he wore dark jeans, a gray coat, and a nervous, almost boyish smile. In his hand was a paper bag with 2 takeaway cups. "Hot chocolate," he said, handing her one. "Real kind. Not the watered-down office stuff." Her smile was genuine. "You remembered I hate office cocoa." "I remember everything about you," he said, more softly than he meant to. He led her down to the curb where a sleek black SUV waited. Not the usual chauffeur-driven corporate car, but something more personal. More him. They drove with the windows slightly cracked, the city lights flickering in through the windshield as music played low in the background. Instrumental jazz, surprisingly soothing. He didn't tell her where they were going. When they arrived, she blinked in surprise. It was a park. But not just any park. The park. The same one where Lucas had proposed. She turned to look at him. "I asked your sister," he said quietly. "I wanted to know where he asked you." Nadia looked down, stunned. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." They walked slowly, cups in hand, along the damp gravel path lined with maple trees. The same trees that had been bright red and gold the day Lucas got on one knee. Now they stood mostly bare, their leaves scattered like little memories on the ground. "Is this okay?" Alexander asked gently. "I wasn't sure if it would hurt." She took a slow breath. It does, she admitted. But not the way it used to. They reached the old bench by the fountain, the one she hadn't dared return to since the accident. She sat, and he sat beside her, close but not touching. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city were distant. Only the rustle of leaves and the trickle of water broke the silence. Finally, she turned to him. I sent the ring today, she said. He nodded, his throat working. I never thought I'd be ready, she continued, eyes on the trees. But when I looked at it this morning, I didn't feel like it was mine anymore. Alexander looked at her, not with pity, not with desire, but with something deeper. Respect, admiration, maybe even awe. You're the bravest person I've ever met, he whispered. She gave a soft laugh. That's not true. It is, he insisted. You walked through grief with more grace than I've ever seen. And now you're standing here, letting someone like me try again. She looked at him. There was no wall in his eyes now. No mask. No armor. I want to do this right, he said, voice low. No games. No pretense. Just you and me. If you'll let me. Her fingers brushed against his on the bench. His hand turned, catching hers gently. I don't know where this will go, she said. But I'd like to find out. His smile was quiet. Real. Vulnerable. I will never take that for granted, he said. They stayed like that on the bench for a while longer, fingers entwined, shoulders touching. The city faded behind them, and the past slipped quietly into memory. For the first time in a long time, the present didn't feel like a wait. It felt like a beginning. Monday arrived with a subtle sense of change. The kind you couldn't name aloud, but felt in the little things, like how the air smelled just a bit warmer even though autumn was fading fast, or how the sky looked brighter, even through the same office windows she passed every day. Nadia Foster stepped into Kane Global with her shoulders a little lighter, her stride a touch more confident, and her left hand conspicuously bare. The ring was gone. No one noticed at first, none of the buzzing assistants or sharp-eyed execs. But when she passed by the glass walls of Alexander Kane's office, she knew immediately that he had. He was already standing by his desk, halfway through reviewing a report, but the moment his eyes landed on her hand, he stilled. Nadia met his gaze. No words were exchanged. Just a small nod. A smile. A silent understanding that something had ended, and something else had just begun. He didn't summon her into his office that morning. He didn't need to. Instead, at precisely 11:03 a.m., a meeting invitation popped up on her screen. Lunch, personal location, off-site time, 12:30 p.m. from Alexander Kane. She clicked accept before her heart could talk her out of it. At exactly 12:27, he was waiting for her in the lobby, holding 2 cups of coffee. Hers just the way she liked it. Oat milk, no sugar, slightly burnt because she secretly liked the bitter edge. He'd remembered. Nadia, he said, offering her the cup. No assistant duties today. Just lunch. With me. She arched a brow. Is that an order or a request? He smiled, slow and genuine. A terrified, hopeful request. She laughed then. And so did he. And for the first time, they walked out of the building side by side. Not boss and employee, not aloof CEO and ghosted assistant, but 2 people standing on level ground. They didn't go anywhere fancy. He took her to a small French cafe tucked between 2 aging bookstores a few blocks from the office. A place with mismatched chairs, worn wooden tables, and plants spilling from chipped ceramic pots in the windows. It smelled like cinnamon and butter, and no one called him sir. They sat in the corner, and he didn't pull out his phone once. No calls, no emails. Just him, present, open, and surprisingly human. I used to come here before I became the person I am now, he said, stirring his espresso. When I still believed I'd be different. Nadia sipped her tea. You're not who people think you are, Alexander. His gaze flicked up, sharp and searching. And who do you think I am? She set her cup down gently. Someone who's scared to be seen, but dying to be. He exhaled softly, the truth of it cutting through the space between them. I want to be better, he said. She reached across the table, not for a grand gesture, but for a simple one, her fingers brushing his. He turned his palm up and held her hand gently, reverently, like it was something fragile and precious. "You already are," she said. Back at the office, everything continued as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Alexander no longer called her Miss Foster. He said her name, Nadia, and every time he did, it felt like a promise. His tone softened. His glances lingered. There were no more veiled insults, no sharp corrections in front of others. Only private smiles, quiet moments, respectful silence where words used to bruise. The team noticed the change, of course, but no one said anything, except for Marissa from legal, who passed Nadia in the hallway and muttered, "About damn time." Nadia smiled. The following Friday, Alexander showed up at her desk just after 5. No assistant in sight. No agenda in hand. "You free?" he asked. "For what?" He hesitated, something he rarely did. "For the rest of the night?" She tilted her head. "You're asking me out? I'm asking you for a chance to prove that I can be more than the man who yelled at you for ordering sparkling instead of still water." She laughed, covering her mouth. "And maybe," he added with a sly grin, "to let you yell at me for once." "Oh, I will," she said, rising and grabbing her coat. "Don't think I've forgotten about the paperclip incident." He chuckled, and she caught a glimpse of a man she hadn't known existed. A version of him buried under years of fear and self-defense. They left together, no longer hiding, no longer pretending. Weeks passed, and with each passing day, the awkward edges softened. Their rhythm began to form. Text messages that turned into phone calls, coffee breaks that became dinners, late-night emails signed "not with regards." "But can't wait to see you." They didn't rush it. Nadia had let go of her past, and Alexander was learning how to build a future. Brick by brick. With honesty. With patience. With love. One morning, he reached into his drawer and pulled out a small box. Not velvet. Not black. But wood. Smooth. Unadorned. He didn't open it. He just held it, watching her read a contract across the table in his office, her lips pursed in concentration, her hair falling from the bun she had tried to secure in a rush. He smiled. He would wait, not because he feared her answer, but because for the first time in his life, he understood that love wasn't about control. It wasn't about fear. It was about timing, trust, growth, and she was already his beginning. Outside the office window, autumn melted into winter. But inside, something had just begun. Quietly, deliberately, beautifully. A love story built not on grand gestures, but on broken people choosing each other, day after day. When they finally learned that sometimes letting go is exactly what makes space for something real. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.